welcome to the new season of the Navigating Turbulent Times webinar series. We're a minute late, but nonetheless, I'm Jenny Thomas, Head of Marketing Communication at IWFM. And for this week's webinar, starting our autumn term, our guest is immersing us in the world of neuroscience. Tom Flatau is an international speaker and expert in neuroscience and its application to negotiation and leadership. He says that he's living proof that anyone can be who they want to be and exceed the expectations of others. And Tom is going to lead an interactive session today, introducing us to neuroscience-based techniques that can ensure win-win outcomes and build long-term profitable relationships, and as well as covering the pitfalls of negotiating remotely, given the current circumstances many of us find ourselves in. So also just thinking about how we're working today. A very, very warm IWFM welcome to you, Tom. Now, I believe you want this session to be energetic and participative as possible as we can do through our screens. We very much want you, our audience, to get involved. So please post your questions in the chat as they occur to you, and we'll try to get through as many as possible as we go along to keep the momentum going. Meanwhile, I'm going to stay on the screen for the duration as a sort of informal assistant come helper, perhaps even to have some of my own limiting beliefs tested. You never know. Tom has kindly also agreed to share his slides at the end of the session, so you can have them to refer to if you miss anything as we go along, so don't worry about any of that. Right, I think it's time to get started, Tom, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jenny. And can everyone see me and the slides? Just give me a virtual nod. Yeah, that's okay. Fantastic. Great. Well, we've got a nice group of people here, 60 to 70 so far and going up. And I'd like to introduce you to the Black Belt Negotiator program. And what we've got here is a quick, I'm on for an hour, and I'm introducing these key elements of our Black Belt Negotiator program that we run with the IWFM. So I'd like you to, as well as what Jenny said, keep it really interactive. And to do that, I'm just going to get an eyeball of all of you. Now I can only see 4 people, never mind. And I'd really like you to make this relevant to your situation, what you're dealing with at the moment. The more you can do that, the more you'll get out of it. And as I say, I'll be covering the key elements and the key things that we cover in the one-day program. And if anyone is interested in pursuing that, just put your name in chat. So this is all about getting the deal you want and building better relationships. And too often we think that if I push too hard for what I want, it will spoil the relationship or even blow the deal. Does that ring true, guys? Again, if you just type answers in chats, that's probably the best way to communicate. What do we get in there? People sort of agreeing, nodding with that, Jenny? Yeah, great. So look, what we're going to be doing is looking at the subconscious undercurrents that actually make or break your deal. And we're going to look at how the brain works. We're going to take a journey into neuroscience. I'm an applied neuroscience scientist, so we'll be looking under the bonnet of the brain and seeing what's going on there when we're negotiating. And just to say, we have run this program all over the world in all different sectors, not just FM, but construction, engineering. And we're also credited with the Institute of Leadership and Management. And so what we're covering today is applicable across all sectors, all cultures. It really is culturally neutral, what we'll be looking at. And what's really interesting, and I'm going to say a little bit more about this as well, is that although we're going to be looking at sales and negotiation, or negotiation principally, a lot of these skills are transferable and apply to leadership as well. Because if you think about it, when you're negotiating and selling, what you're doing is you're trying to get people to jump on board with your ideas externally. Leadership is really about doing the same thing, but internally. So towards the end of the session, I'll be looking at some of the behaviors that we're interested in. So just to introduce myself, I run Team Working International and been running these programs for the last 20 years or so. It's always important to have a bit of context to me and the person you're talking to. So I'm going to tell you one little thing about me, and that is, we roll the clock back 50, not quite that many years, almost 50 years. I was 12 years old, and I was brought up in a very strict household, and there's no rock and roll at all when I was 12, and my parents only listened to Mozart or Beethoven. So that was my world. So when some friends took me to see Jesus Christ Superstar in London, the rock opera, when the show opened and it burst into loud, heavy rock, I just did not know what had hit me. And I was engaged from the very second it started. And I swore then and there, I wanted to be a rock star. So my 13th birthday was coming up. I got my parents to get me an electric guitar, and I thought, surely if I've got rock and roll genes, all I need to do is put the guitar under my pillow, wake up, and I'd be able to play like Jimi Hendrix. So I did just that. And Jenny, let me ask you, do you think I woke up being able to play like Jimi Hendrix?
I'm not sure, Tom. I think maybe you might have struggled a little bit the next morning.
You're dead right. And in fact, the next morning I thought, no, I've just got the wrong fingers. They can't get around that guitar neck. I'm physiologically unable to do it. So I pursued a little bit, but basically after a few months, I gave it up as a bad job. My rock and roll consigned to the dustbin, my rock and roll career. So yeah, that could have been the end of that sad story, but roll the clock forward 30 years or so, 35 years. I was in my 40s. I thought, I'm going to give this one more go. So this time I bought a bass guitar, and I did things a little bit differently this time because I knew it didn't work the first time putting it under my pillow. So Jenny, what do you think I did this time to try and be a rock star?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm sure you did something innovative and creative and thought somehow you could just get there.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I did something probably a bit boring. I had lessons. I practiced, and it was sort of months, in fact, years of hard work, playing with other people, being rebuffed because I was so useless, being chucked out of bands because I wasn't good enough, but I persisted, persevered. And then after a while, this is what happened. There I am on the right-hand side of the stage in an amazing band that I absolutely love. There are 3 other members of the band behind the camera, so there's 6 of us in total. We play my favorite type of music, funk music. And, when I'm on stage entertaining the audience, there's nothing quite like it. It literally gets me shivering all over with excitement. So that's my passion. But you might be wondering, why am I introducing myself like this? What's the point of this story? So again, let's have a few people put in chat. Why am I sharing a bit of myself with you? After all, this is a negotiation seminar. What's this got to do with negotiation? And Jenny, if you want to sort of see what people are coming up.
Oh, so we've got some answers coming in, Tom. So to show anything is possible, says Marie. Making connections, personal touch, says Michael. Building relationships, says Claire. Giving personal info, drawing us in, says Simon. Storytelling, says Gemma. Common ground and relationships.
Whoa.
Building connections and trust.
Guys,
making personal connections.
Yeah. Guys, you have.
I think our audience is on it. Do you?
You have absolutely hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, absolutely. Because too often we think, oh, I'm going in for negotiation. And by the way, earlier this morning, I just was training a bunch of people about negotiating new employment and so on. And you often go in, you're very nervous. And so you forget to, that we humans, we're wired to build relationships. We all know that, but we actually forget to do it. And when we do it successfully, what happens? It triggers a part of the brain called the ventral striatum, which you might know better as the dopamine reward system. And hopefully, when I was giving you a little bit of information about myself, it got you excited, engaged, emotionally connected with me. And that's the part of the brain, the dopamine reward system, that does that. So imagine what most people do going into a negotiation. It's all about, they start sort of throwing around numbers and demands and so on. Very, very different. So first rule of negotiation is that the brain is a social organ. The brain is a social organ, and we have an underlying desire to connect with other people. And we all know that, but we don't do it when we get into the negotiating room, because just the word negotiation sometimes can send shivers down our spine. So I think we've got our first poll question. And again, this is kind of relates to my guitar story as well. So Lucy, would you like to just pop that up? Oh, it's different from what I expected. Well, that just shows. No, that's fine, Lucy. You can leave that up as well, not a problem. And unless you can't. Yeah, so just to sort of find out a bit about you guys and what you're interested in. Do you mainly negotiate with clients, suppliers, or internally with colleagues? And I think you're allowed multiple choices here. So let's see what we've come up with. Okay, so let's see what people say. Okay, so clients, 38% of you, suppliers, a bit more, and internally with colleagues, even more. Very, very interesting. And that really is true, because if you think about it, our whole day is a negotiation, isn't it? Negotiating with co-workers, with family members, and so on. So thank you for that. And then I think we've got another poll question. And this is all about, again, this relates to my guitar story. Is there anything such thing as a natural negotiator, do you think? Do you think some of you are just, handicapped because you weren't born a certain way? So Lucy, if we could just see, so you can only choose one. So some people are natural negotiators, others don't have the right personality. So it'd be really interesting to see what we think there. And when people have had a chance to vote, you shouldn't need to think too hard about that. Let's see what the results are. Okay, so some people are natural, others don't have the right personality. Very, very interesting. So 2/3 think you're born a negotiator, and a third of you think that no, it's a skill like learning the guitar or anything else, you can pick it up. So, this is quite a provocative topic, and I don't want to make enemies because people have very passionate views. But a question I'd like to ask is, if you can't really learn negotiation because you're born a certain way, what benefit is there on being on this webinar? Yeah, because you might, if you're either a natural negotiator or not, it seems to follow that, going on a course won't do an awful lot of good. And have we got anyone replying to this controversial topic or putting any comments in, Jenny?
Oh, so a couple of people are saying you can learn new skills. People are saying that they want to learn how to negotiate, Tom. So I think there is some optimism in our audience here.
Right.
Oh, hang on, we've got a bit of a challenge as well. So Paul says, this is a poor deduction, Tom. The question did not ask if negotiation could be learned. So,
okay.
and then I think it depends on the definition of negotiation and what is the end result. So people wanting to learn what it is, Tom, and some people are thinking it might have been a trick question.
Great. Okay. So Paul, can I throw back a challenge to you? And I love feedback because you learn and develop from feedback. So if there's a better way of wording the question, and I totally appreciate what you're saying, just pop that in chat and we'll see if we can have an improved version of that. But what I'd like to overwhelmingly stress, is that it's very, very much a learned skill. There's a process, there's a structure, and absolutely you can learn it. And I'm going to share some of these things with you all. So, next question, really, I'm interested in, and it seems like we're getting a bit of poll overload here, but I think we've got 6 poll questions, I believe, so this is number 3. I'm just interested in what your biggest issues are in negotiation, what goes wrong, and then we'll see if we can tackle them in this webinar. So we've got, and again, we've got multiple choices, but, you know, try and not choose more than, say, 2 or maximum 3. Let's see what people come up with. Okay, let's see the scores at the doors, please. Great, I'm delighted. Lack of self-confidence is number 1. And what I will do is point you all in a direction of an article I wrote, quite just a short, snappy overview article on 9 ways of improving your self-confidence at the negotiating table. But I will definitely touch on that as that is overwhelming the key thing. And absolutely, you're dead right, guys, because before we've only had language for about 40,000 years. Before that, we sort of communicated with grunts and so on as human beings. And so our body, our brain is designed to pick up on body language and so on. So we intuitively do that. And if someone is lacking confidence, we will subconsciously pick up on that and take advantage of it. Yeah. Whereas if someone is coming over with oodles of confidence, we will be much more cautious and not beat them down so much. So really, really critical element, this. Great. So what we are going to look at today, and this is definitely, we cover all these items in a lot more depth on the program itself, is we look at a structure, really a 5-step funnel, and I'm going to introduce that today so you can get consistent results, because you see, most of us don't even realize that there's a process to negotiation. We go in underprepared and literally get hit and miss results. Sometimes we win, other times we kick ourselves and, oh, why didn't I do that? So I hope I will put an end to that. Building self-confidence, incredibly important, as I've explained, and we explain how do you do that. And again, as I said, I'll send you a document to do that so that you will come across with oodles of confidence. The second item, when I said what are the problems, were this getting carried away with emotions. And so this understanding the emotional undercurrents is incredibly important, and we'll be looking at that and why, you know, more importantly, why that happens and what we can do about it. Stop making unnecessary unnecessary concessions. A lot of us feel, oh, I'll just chop a bit off the price, or I'll throw in a bit of extras and then I'll get the deal. But unfortunately, often it works against us. They just push even harder because you're giving stuff away. So they say, oh, that's good, I'll just try for a bit more. So there's another way that we need to behave. We need to get to the real root issues by asking the right questions. So what are the core issues? What are the root issues? And we'll be looking at that a little bit. We've already talked about reading signals and body language, incredibly important. And that can really shift the balance of power in your favor. And and how we influence other people. Negotiation is all about influence. Finally, we'll be looking at some of the tricks, and today I'll be covering one particular trick, and I hope I can do this with you, Jenny, at the end. Nothing to be too nervous about. But on the program itself, there's 7 of these tricks that are really important to make sure we don't get caught off guard by. So really what we're looking at is getting the deal you want and building better relationships. In order to do this, we have a 5-step funnel, and this is the process we'll be looking at today. So stage 1 is prepare, where we understand the territory. What's going on? What are the issues? Stage 2, discuss. And again, this is where we turn our focus to them. How can we help them? How can we build rapport? How can, if we give them what they want, you know, will they reciprocate? And chances are yes. Next is testing the options. So in the discussion phase, we unearth a load of options. Here we test them. So if I would say, you know, I've got some oranges, you've got some apples, should we do a trade? You'll notice there are no numbers attached to that, no details. That's what testing is. It's not until we get to the trade phase when we add the numbers. So I've got 5 apples. If you give me 3 oranges, how about that? Yeah, very important we separate those 2 stages, as we'll see later. Then we close, where we sort of confirm understanding, and that's where things can start going wrong. So we'll look at one of the problems that can happen at the closing phase. And what we're trying to ensure is that there's a smooth progression through these phases, particularly when we're negotiating virtually. There's much less information we get visually negotiating virtually, so it's all the more important we have a structure. There will be a certain amount of backtracking, but we need to try and take that down to a minimum. And you'll notice as we get through the process, the stages get smaller. So we need to invest more time and energy up front, and then the subsequent stages become easier and easier. So let's look at the preparation phase. And we use an incredibly powerful technique for this, mind mapping, that I'm sure a lot of you know already, but we do it in a very particular way for a very particular reason. And preparation, and we do it in teams. So the reason why we don't prepare is because it's boring, it's too time consuming. So we make sure that it's a high energy activity and really engaging. And people love this when we share this technique with them. So what's interesting about preparation is that when we're under pressure, the thinking brain, and we'll be looking at the difference between the thinking brain and the more, if you like, emotional brain, the thinking brain shuts down. So if they throw something at you and you're not expecting it, you'll freeze. And I'm sure some of you experienced that already. So the more prepared we are, the better. And part of the preparation is thinking, what are we after here? What are they after? And often we forget to think about the other side. What are that long term as well as short term? So again, you know, I was training people on negotiating salaries and new packages earlier this morning, as I said, and some of them were sort of disgruntled that they were being offered less than they thought they were worth. But, you know, what about in a year's time? How could I be promoted? What are the prospects? So don't, and again, there's a cognitive bias, and some of you might have heard that word, unconscious bias, where we focus more on the short term than the long term. So think, open up, what could be the possibility with this client or supplier over time if you're not getting exactly what you want here and now. Discovering common ground, incredibly important. And we've got all sorts of social media tools so we can find out who we'll be talking to. And again, what I recommend to people, if you can informally meet people beforehand, it will actually double your chances of success. And again, one of the delegates on my program this morning said this exactly happened to her. She had a chat on WhatsApp beforehand with one of the people on the interviewing panel, and found out exactly what questions would be asked when it came to the interview, which he had immediately afterwards, and they were the same questions. So she's incredibly well prepared. So really do try and meet up informally beforehand, even if it's over the phone or WhatsApp. The other incredibly powerful thing is having a plan B. So if you don't succeed with this negotiation, if you don't get what you want, what other options have you? If you don't have a plan B, you're creating a hostage to fortune. They will beat you down and you will take it. We're now going to look at tradables, and this is something that is done incredibly badly by most people. And a tradable are all the elements within your negotiation. And often we just focus on price and a few salary or, a few headline things and forget everything else. So I'm saying, no, there's way more. And when we do this with companies, when we do this internally, and as I said, if any of you are interested in this, we will do this with you. We get, 200 tradables, 200 things, because we're so close to our own product, we don't know that we're actually giving something away that's really valuable. We don't know what we're giving away. So we get people to be really clear about this. What are they giving? What are their unique selling points? And how can they capitalize and leverage those? One of the most important things in negotiation, and these tradables, we carry all the way down the funnel. So we look there, they're a template of your business, if you like, that we can use as we explain right through the process. And that one of the nice things in negotiating virtually is that, you can have your notes in front of you and no one else will see. So that's really handy. And, the more tradables you have, the more flexibility it gives you. So let's turn our attention to emotion. And look, by the way, if you've got any questions, it's something you don't quite understand, do put it in chat, and Jenny will interrupt me. If
I've got one question actually, Tom, that I'd like to put to you that Islam has raised on this, and I think it's a really interesting point he makes about preparation, because he says, can over preparation actually add more pressure to the deal, and how you kind of invested so much in it, you kind of going in almost under too much pressure. How can we avoid that, or how might we kind of get a good balance on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And I think there are two, sorry, was it Islam who asked?
Yes.
I think there are two things, perhaps you've collapsed Islam. And number one is preparing well. And number two is chilling out. And I know what you mean. If you've got an exam coming up and you sort of really cram, and you can feel under pressure. So I would say, yeah, prepare as well as you can, but also do stuff to make sure you're relaxed. Because you're dead right. If you're under pressure, if you feel stressed and pressurized, you won't perform well. And again, I've got, I can send you a link to some blogs on resilience. Just deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing is one tip before you go into a negotiation, because if you breathe diaphragmatically, deep breathing, the vagus nerve is triggered by your diaphragm, and that is part of your parasympathetic nervous system, and that relaxes you. Yeah, and there are all sorts of other things like mindset. If you've done your homework, you're prepared, go for a walk half an hour before and just get yourself mentally in the right state of mind. I hope that, does that answer the question,
There's a
Jenny?
thumbs up from Islam in the chat, Tom, so I
Right.
think that was a good one.
Fantastic. Yeah, great question. Thank you, Islam. And please do ask questions, guys. So emotion and logic. So decision making, you know, we're negotiating, the other side's going to make decisions. Part of it will be based on the facts and information. Part will be on emotion. And I know emotion is a very laden word and all sorts of people mean different things by, but broadly speaking, let's have the next poll question, please, Lucy. Is decision making based mainly on facts or mainly on emotions? So let's see what you guys think of this one. Okay, and let's give you another 5 seconds to vote. And scores at the doors, please, Lucy. Okay, most people went for the safe option, 50-50. Quarter of you thought mainly facts, and 18% mainly emotion. Okay, and again, this is a place where I can make a lot of enemies because it's a little bit counterintuitive. And again, you can Google this afterwards. And what we find is that actually emotion counts for 80%. And facts and information, obviously, 20%. And neuroscientists now are saying, well, actually, we think emotion counts for 95% and facts and information only 5%. And we'll see why a bit later on. Having said that, though, if your facts and information are totally ridiculous, that's a deal breaker. You're not even on the field. So if you're selling something and your pricing's just ridiculous, doesn't bear any relation to the competition, you're not on the field, that's a deal breaker. However, once you're on the field, the emotion is the deal maker. And what do we mean by emotion? We mean really understanding what their pain points are. Yeah, taking trouble to understand that and showing how you can solve those. So you're really talking to them at a deep level and helping them. That's what we mean by emotional in that sense. And, you know, we kind of know that because advertisers use emotion all the time. Not a hint of facts and information there, nor there. Nor there. And indeed, the UK Institute of Practitioners in Advertising show that emotional campaigns are twice as effective as rational campaigns. And even Aristotle knew this 2,500 years ago. No appeal to logic is ever as successful as an appeal to emotion. And again, we know that instinctively because, you know, let me give you one example. Again, it's very fresh in my mind. Sorry to keep using this example of the session I had this morning, but one lady had a job interview and she thought, oh, wow, God, I really love this job. And they sold it to her in a way that just tapped into her needs. So once again, that is what we mean by emotional. You know, this package wasn't quite right for her, but so let's see what happens there. Rational buying need. Look, I'm going to share with you some research that was done by a decision scientist, Dan Erley, and this was in response to a campaign by The Economist. And this was the campaign, and the people had 3 options. And you might be thinking, why would anyone in their right mind go for that middle option? What would be? So they tested out the campaign, and indeed, no one went for that middle option. 16% went for online only, 84% for print and online. So we've got a product here, no one wants that middle option. So if we remove that middle option and rerun the campaign, we should get roughly the same results, wouldn't you say, guys? Let's see what people reckon in chat.
Or more online. So somebody's saying no, not the same results. Somebody else, Michael's saying more online is my guess.
Yeah, well, guys, you are, and I've just seen
More online, yeah.
Beta, you chose a contractor for his smile, an extraordinary business card. Well, that's a lovely story. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and someone else is saying not the same because Paul says they're not getting a deal now, so they can't. There's no deal on the table.
So guys, you're absolutely 100% correct. And in fact, look, the results were reversed when we removed that. So really significant difference, and it reduced revenue by 44%. So why does that happen? And Paul, you're quite right, they're not getting a deal, but why? You know, my question is, well, why? How do they know they're not getting the deal? Why? And the answer is because we've removed a reference point. So previously we had a reference point. Print only was 125. So in relation to that, print and online was a really good deal. Once we remove that reference point, we can't see that it's a deal. Yeah. So this is a really important thing. And it leads us to brain rule number 2. The brain can only evaluate against an expectation or a reference point. So once we remove that reference, when we had the reference point, everyone said, oh, goody, goody, print and online is a great deal, I'll go for that. Once we remove that, people just say, oh, I don't know, I'll go for the cheapest. Yeah. Why is this important to negotiators? Well, because if we start throwing out figures too early, we are in danger of creating reference points, and in particular low reference points. You want to sell something, perhaps you want a deal, so you might say, oh, this client's giving me a great deal, I'm going to do the FM for the whole of County Hall, so I'm gonna, you can have free training, 20% discount, free this, all these goodies I'm going to throw in because, you know, doing the FM, winning an FM contract for County Hall is such a big deal. So you give all those goodies away. You say, yeah, you can have all that. And they come back to you and say, well, look, initially, we're just going to do the FM for this tiny little section of County Hall. And thanks very much for the 20% discount and all the freebies and this and that and the other. Yeah, how easy, and I'm sure some of you have been in that position, so just think if you have been in that position, how easy is it then for you to negotiate them back up and say, no, 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 you can't have 20% here, you can't have free this, you can't have free that, because this is a really small contract now. It's difficult, isn't it? And you've put yourself in that position because you've created that reference point. They know that 20% is available and they're going to fight for it, even though it's them who've moved the goalposts. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah, that's why we separate the trading phase from the testing phase. We don't want to, and we're going to look at this in a lot more detail later on. And again, when we do this on a day course with you guys, we really go through some proper scenarios, role play it, and so on. So let's look at the discuss phase. Now look how long we've spent. Look how long we've spent on preparation. So it must be important. So in discussion, okay, again, this is your chance to really find out about them, for you to do the listening, for you to ask questions. Those are the key skills here. It's your chance to build rapport and create a reward environment. The dopamine, remember, that's what we're looking at, rather than a threat environment, which is cortisol. So what's the common ground? What are the shared values? Are there any signals that you can listen to? Are there movement? And very, very importantly, be careful what you've promised. Be careful what you give, what you promise, because anything you say here, you've lost. If you informally say, yeah, I expect we can give you 15% here, that's gone. Forget it. It'll be a nightmare trying to get it back. And it's that sours relationships, because people have an expectation and you've given them that expectation. You could say it's a bit of a trick, but there we go. So the discussion phase, we often find in a virtual environment, people skip that because we're much more on task and want to get down to the nitty-gritty. So make sure you give enough time to discuss phase here. Another thing that we need to be aware of in the discussion phase is the difference between position and interest. So the position is visible, it's what they say, what's on the table, clearly visible. The interest is hidden, and we need to be a bit of a Sherlock Holmes to find out really what their issues are. And that's where the emotional element comes in. So your job as a good negotiator is to get into the hidden and bring it out to the surface. And I've got an example here to explain a little bit. And Jenny, could I possibly use you to read this paragraph out?
Yes, so I'll read it from the top, Tom. So 2 sisters were fighting over an orange, and after a lot of arguing, they took half each. One sister ate her half and threw away the peel. The other grated her half of the peel to make marmalade and threw away the flesh.
Very good. So what's the moral of that story then? Which stage did they discuss? If they hadn't missed the discuss phase, they could have actually doubled. Each sister could have taken away double what they got. So, you know, some people call negotiation as a compromise, but I'd say that's a bit limiting in yourselves. And, you know, just think to yourself, how many opportunities for a win-win solution are you throwing away at the moment? So there's some highlights in the discuss phase. And again, we do some really interesting examples on the program with this. But for now, we're going to move on to the test phase. And in this phase, I'm going to use a really simple example. Okay, I'm just going to use 2 variables here. And remember, we've got the language here we use, and I'm going to use a fictitious scenario. Let's say I'm selling desks, okay? So if you could buy 300 desks, then I could consider a volume discount. If you could buy 300 desks, I could consider a volume discount. So what have I not said? And let's have a few people put in chat. What haven't I said? That's more important than what I had said.
So price, the individual price, Tom, how much the discount is.
Exactly, yeah. So I
volume discount, we've got some clever people on this, Tom.
Yeah.
Numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I exactly. And the key here is don't disclose your numbers for the very reason we've just discussed, which is, let's say, I say, if you could buy 300 desks, then I could consider a 15% discount. They'll say, fantastic, yeah, we were looking for a 15% discount. I'll have 100 desks. Yeah, and then my job would be really difficult to say, no, you can't have 15% for 100 desks. You can only have 7%. And again, as I say, it's that destroys relationships, because it's a question of what people expect and they're not getting what they expect, even though you could argue they're trying it on. A skillful negotiator will really take you to task over this one. So this way we retain our flexibility because we haven't given anything away, and it avoids false expectations. You see, the brain doesn't care what the actual price is. The brain only cares that we're getting a good deal. Brain and you know, with desks, so okay, that's probably a bad example because it's a commodity, so you can compare it with other competitors. But in particular, if we're selling a service, it's very hard to compare apples with oranges. So
question, Tom, can I come in on this? Because one of the, you know, I've seen all these really good, smart responses in the chat, but the question I think I would have here is what techniques do I deploy to avoid giving people the numbers without actually saying in terms, I'm not telling you the numbers, or is that an okay thing to say? How do you? manage that inner conversation?
Yeah, but very important question, Jenny. Thank you for asking that. And absolutely. And what I would say, and people say it to me all the time, what's your day rate? What's your, how much is this? And I say, look, is it okay if we sit down and ask you a few questions first, so I can really look at what you're after, and then, you know, make it a precise offer for you. I don't want to charge you more for something you might not need. And no one yet in 20 years has said, no, that's not okay. And if they did, I probably wouldn't want them as a customer anyway. And that's why, Jenny, negotiation is an art as well as a science. Yeah, because you still need to, you know, be able to deal with that thing. So I'm not saying negotiation is easy, but I'm saying if you follow this process, 80% of the time you'll come out with a successful outcome. But thanks, really important question. So why do emotions take over? Let's look at this, and it's really important to realize that our brain existed as for survival. Literally, that's why we originally had a brain, to survive. So we could say, is this thing a friend or foe? And it's the non-conscious brain that was first to survive. And in this case, it's a foe, and it triggers our fight, freeze, flee system. It's only much later, 2 million years ago, rather than 200 million years ago, that we developed the conscious brain, which is our thinking, our analytical brain, and the one we use at work when we're doing calculations and so on. But what's important to realize is that our non-conscious brain is actually 96% of our brain. Yeah, our thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, is a mere 4%. And that is why emotions are 5 times more powerful than logic, because they're seated in our limbic system within the non-conscious brain. So ignore it at your peril. These days, of course, we don't have tigers as we used to as threats on the savannah plain, but we have disgruntled customers, angry bosses, co-workers who disapprove, some of us anyway. And it triggers exactly the same brain systems. We freeze, fight, or flee. So at the negotiating table, fleeing might be backing off when we don't challenge. And I've got a great friend. This is a story that baffles me. I've got a great friend, Phil, and he was selling his sailing boat, a dinghy. And he advertised it for 2,500, which is a very fair price. And a guy came along and said, I'll give you 2,000 for it. And Phil went, oh, okay, without any pushback. Again, it really just shows how we don't like to rock the boat. We don't like conflict. But again, he didn't do that guy a favor, because what do you think the guy's thinking now? Oh, I should have asked 1,500 quid. What's wrong with this boat if he gave it away?
Maybe it's not all that good, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you need to push back, guys. You need to give a bit of resistance. Otherwise, they haven't fought for it, and it won't be as worth as much as if you had to give them a bit of a fight. Having said that, you don't want a real fight on your hands. You don't want, and again, you know, often in negotiation, we argue to win instead of understand, particularly in internal negotiations. You know, when should we launch this product, that product, people want to score points. Yeah. And there are consequences to both those negotiating behaviors. So let's look at the 2 motivations of the brain. And we've got minimizing danger, which is basically staying alive, and maximizing reward. That's getting enough food, water, sex, shelter. And minimizing danger, staying alive, is much more important than maximizing reward. Hence, negativity bias, which some of you will have heard of, because our brain, our non-conscious brain, is scanning for threats about 5 times a second. And the default settings, so we stay alive, is the threat response. So we assume danger, and what that does is it releases cortisol and adrenaline in our brain, and if things get really threatening, it will actually shut down our thinking brain, because faced with a predator, we don't want to think about what to do. We want that instinctive reaction, freeze, fight, fly. So that, even a mild threat at the negotiating table will give us tunnel vision, put us into win-lose mentality and make us self-focused. And that's actually a recipe for disaster at the negotiating table. We want to create a reward response. And when we do that, we trigger the dopamine reward system. Oxytocin is also coursing around, which makes us feel affinity towards our in-group. It puts us in discovery mode, which makes us innovative, solution-focused, and collaborative. And isn't that what you want at the negotiating table? So again, you know, we do a lot of exercises when we do this on the full day course, and we get people to really think, what are we doing that maybe we're not even aware we're doing that increases threats for the other party, so we don't get what we want, because, you know, threats reciprocated. Emotions are contagious. If you're giving off threat, that's what you'll get back. And what could we be doing to increase reward? And, you know, again, this all happens subconsciously, because we don't deliberately create a threat, but it's things we do unintentionally. Brings me on to brain rule number 3. Empathy is your negotiating superpower. And again, I can refer you to the guy called Chris Voss, who's the lead FBI hostage negotiator. Before he took over, the hostages used to get shot up. When he took over, he realized that what you needed to do was create empathy with the hostage takers. That doesn't mean agree with them, but it means empathize with their situation, understand their perspective, that it is valid, they have a valid perspective. Once he did that, the hostages got out alive. Yeah. So if we can do that in hostage negotiation, I'm sure it's something we can all do in commercial negotiations. So we're racing towards the trading phase now. And again, you know, any questions, please do put them in chat. But I'd like to finish on the hour, because I know some of you have got to go then. But I will stay around afterwards if any of you have further questions and so on. So the trading phase, very similar to the previous phase, but now the testing phase, we can add our numbers. So if you could buy 300 desks, I could consider a volume discount. And this time I've got a 13% volume discount. So let me ask guys in chat, why 13%? What was wrong with the good old 15%?
Wriggle room.
Okay.
Says Hazel, giving some cushion in case you need to increase later. Yeah, allows room to negotiate. Tradables. Says Joshua.
Absolutely correct. And it gives a perception of that's a calculated figure.
Baseline.
If we say 15%, it's like, oh, finger in the air. That's a nice round number. We're encouraging them to negotiate in multiples of 5, so they will negotiate us up to 20%, won't they? If we start.
So Paul's put a smart comment in. He says, I use this with time to get people there on time. So
very good. Yeah.
That might be an intention grabber.
No, that I do exactly the same. I'm trying to think, oh yes, I've got a great, in the examples, when I used to go to hotels and want a late checkout, I used to say, oh, can I have I need a checkout at 3:15, because, you know, standard checkout's 12 o'clock. And they sort of have to think about it. And it sounds like there's a real reason. So they'd say, yeah, okay. Whereas if I say, oh, can I check out at 3? They'd say, no, our checkout's at 12, but I could extend it to 1. So quite right. It works under lots of different circumstances. And if they did want to negotiate me up at 13%, where would they negotiate me up to most likely? 15.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit like 99p instead of £1.52, says Josh.
Yeah. Cool. And yes, there's been a lot of research on numbers, which we haven't got time to go into now. So the key thing that people don't do is make, like my friend Phil, is make a counter offer. So I'm going to give you the chance to do that now. And we've got a poll question for that. So here we've got 4 options. And what I'd like you to do is just choose the strategically best choice. Now, I know there's lots of missing information and so on, but there is one choice that's strategically better than all the other choices. So just have a read through that and then vote. Okay, let's have we got enough people in? And the winner, we've got a tie, haven't we? The 2 bottom ones. And actually the winner is 17%. If you just leave that up so I can talk through it, the winner is 17% for 200 desks. And the reason that is the strategically best one is because you're pushing me back on 2 variables. You're asking for more discounts and less volume. Yeah, so we need to push on all the tradables at our disposal. We've only got 2 in this example, but in reality, you'd have half a dozen to a dozen. You need to, if you could get a little percentage point increase on all of them, you're doing really, really well. And that last one, 17% for 400 desks, I would even then start off at 200 because then you've got another tradable in your pocket. Yeah, so if I wanted another 200, what would you give me? Cool, thank you. So, another key thing is don't give without getting. And that has really saved me in many situations. So if someone says, I'd like X, you must make sure you ask for something in return. So, negotiation is not about conceding, it's about trading. So you could even say never concede, only trade. As soon as someone asks you for something, what are you getting back in return? So let's go to the final element. And it's a bit about behaviors that we haven't got time to look at in this, but in the program, we look at types of communication behaviors. We look at balancing confidence and openness. Again, really, really powerful stuff that we go into in a lot of depth. But what I'd like to end up with, and this is the final slide, is a little role play, as I forewarned you, Jenny. So we're closing, Jenny. We've been locked in negotiation all day. And we want you as a new partner, and we nearly came to blows at lunchtime. So I'm saying to you, Jenny, that's it's 5 o'clock. We've succeeded. We sort of shake hands. Jenny, wonderful to have you on board. Delightful. We've come up with that deal, and you'll pay the transport costs, won't you?
Oh, can I ask the audience that question, Tom? What I should do?
Yeah. What should Jenny do, guys?
I think, well, we've given you this amazing hosting today because we've hosted you. And I think if we, I don't think we should pay the costs, is what my real position is, that we should pay for your TNS. So we can split the difference. You can give us a discount next time if we come to you and host you host us.
Very, very good. So, sorry, Jenny, just basically the key thing is that's called nibbling what I did. It's not a good thing to do, but it's one of the 7 tricks that we cover on the program, and you need to know how to deal with it. And Jenny dealt pretty well. You must never agree. And the reason why people do it is because the other side often say, oh yes, it's no big deal, because they don't want to get back into the perceived conflict and negotiation. We're great friends now. I can just take that on the chin, but don't, because you're training them to do that in future. So again, what Jenny demonstrated was the adage, never concede, only trade. Yeah, so she asked for something back. If we do that, then I'd like this from you. So that just shows, even at the closing stage, it's really important to have something in your back pocket, a tradable. Yeah. So guys, listen, really pleasure giving you an insight into our black belt negotiation program. If anyone is interested in running this for a whole day internally in your companies, just put a message in chat and we will get back to you. If you want to link in with me, you'll have access to all sorts of videos and blogs and materials, so please do that. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, there's a link there that Cole has put in chat. And I mentioned the 9 ways to boost your confidence. There's a link to that as well. So please, please feel free. And let me thank you all for being so wonderfully interactive. Thank you guys. And Jenny, Lucy and Sheila for brilliantly hosting this seamless rendition, this introduction to a black belt negotiator. Thank you guys.
Oh, thanks very much, Tom, and thank you for that really brilliant session and many more questions. I thought the questions in the chat were really great, and we hopefully picked up most of them and kept that moving, but always lots to do. And Cole has posted in the chat the further information for anybody, so that's absolutely great. I'm conscious that we've gone over time, so thank you so much, Tom. And as Tom says, if anyone wants to find out more about his course, please do. The details are in the chat. Very briefly from me, don't forget our Insight Hub. I think there's another slide you've got there, Tom, but we can just show that to people very briefly.
Oh, yeah.
Jam-packed full of info, and as well as our usual good practice guides, we've got a number of subject matter content hubs on key topics now. We've reordered and restructured that bit of our website, so please go and have a look at it. On the next slide, I've also got a special plug for our conference, which takes place next Monday in the room if you fancy getting into London, online if you don't, or if you can't. We've got an absolutely cracking lineup of speakers tackling the really big subjects of today, with many practical takeaways, such as that we've heard from Tom today. Search conference on our website and get yourself a place if you haven't done so already. And then very finally, tickets are on sale for our IWFM Awards on the 11th of October with some amazing finalists, and of course a dazzling evening out if you fancy getting your dancing shoes on. And I think that's probably all from us now, because I'm conscious of the time. Thank you again so much, Tom. Really informative. I've written lots of notes and I think there's certainly some homework for me to do on that. We will see you all next week, same place, same time, where we will be talking about our sustainability survey results with Peter Brogan in the hot seat, and an excellent panel to discuss those findings with him. So do tune in, and we'll see you then. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.